Good afternoon, everyone. I am Hunter Well. I am a CS110 lab instructor at the U of R, and today we'll be talking about one-dimensional arrays. One-dimensional arrays is like a way of collecting a certain data type all together. So as you can see down the side here, we're going to go through for loops again, one-dimensional array and its fundamental operations, passing arrays to functions, and strings versus arrays. Okay, so we're not going to go in order here. We're going to go with one-dimensional arrays. I want to explain them to you what they are, and then we'll go into why we need a for loop for them. So a one-dimensional array, or as you can see in the top left corner it says 1D array, is a collection of components, and each component is called an array element. Now, a pretty good example actually is the band One Direction. They would be an array that is a data type English singers, and it has a size of 5. But conveniently with our arrays, we don't have to worry about one singer deciding to leave and ruining the rest of the array for us. Okay? So looking at you, Zane, and in One Direction like that, just so tragic. Okay, but let's look at an array declaration. When we're doing an array declaration, what we do first is we say the data type of the array we name the array, and then we say the size of it. So let's go with 50. Alright, so this 50, in this case, is a constant int expression. Alright, this is a constant expression because when we're dealing with arrays, we can't dynamically allocate memory for them. Dynamically allocating memory means that we would be able to create more memory and more space for them during runtime. But that is not currently possible with arrays, and we won't be learning that this semester. That is something you'll be learning in CS115 and 210. Alright, so our arrays will be more of a fixed size. So we'll assume that the user will be using about 50 spaces for their array. Alright, so this data type, though, we can make it whatever we want. It could be character, it could be int, it could be double. We have a lot of options with what we can do with arrays. So if I wanted to declare a character array, all I would have to say is character array, because we could just name it whatever we want, and 50. So this array could hold 50 characters. Alright, so that's what arrays are. They aren't hopefully something scary to you. And that was just doing a simple declaration. So if we do a simple declaration like that, that means our array is completely empty. There is nothing inside of it. So something we have to know how to do is if we look at the next part on the website here, it usually says fundamental operations. We'll worry about that afterwards. We're going to worry about initializing our array. So when we initialize an array, it's exactly like initializing a variable. When I initialize a variable, I say its data type, the variable name, so we'll say int var, and then we put something inside of our variable box. So we'll say 10. Alright, so I declared an integer variable called var, and I set it equal to 10. That is how we initialized it. So when we're initializing an array, we have to say how many numbers we're going to put inside of it, and then we have to say what those numbers are. Alright, so I'll show you two separate ways of doing this. So we're going to go with an integer array, and we'll make it hold 5 numbers. So we'll go int, I forgot to select brushes again. So we'll go int array, we'll say its size, so we'll say 5. And then we have to say what those 5 things are. Sorry, I made a mistake here. You don't need the semicolon. We have to say what it's equal to. Okay, and inside of curly brackets, we say what those 5 things are. So we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have 5 elements inside of our array now. Alright, and that's one way of initializing it. One way. Second way. Okay, the second way is when we initialize our array, we don't have to say the size. So I could just say int array and leave empty square brackets. So the computer will know that this empty square brackets means that this is an array variable of the data type int. And then I could just set it equal to something. So I could say 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Alright, so the computer will implicitly figure out that this right here is the same as this. So it will automatically figure out that the size of this array is 5. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the fundamental part of arrays and how we iterate through them using for loops. So when we were looking here, this array element right here is 0. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, so when we're counting through an array and we want to access stuff and add a certain element, we have to say where that element is, and we start counting from 0. So if I wanted to access the number 3 in this array and display it to the screen, I would have to say cout array 0, 1, 2. Alright, so this would display 3 to our screen because 3 is in the third element of our array, so we go 0, 1, 2. Alright, so that's why we use for loops though, because for loops is a good way of initializing an array. Alright, because the issue with this, bottom one right down here, is our array is a fixed size and it's a hard-coded array. What if we wanted to get user to input what's inside of the array? What if we wanted the user to store what's inside of the array? So what we would have to do is we would have to declare our array. So say I want the user to type in 10 numbers. So we have to declare our array. We have to say int array, and we have to say its size. Great. We now have an array that can take 10 integer numbers. So this is where for loops come in because they allow us to store stuff inside of an array and perform operations on it. So if I wanted to store 10 numbers inside of this array, alright, I would have to go for, I hope you remember how to make your for loops, but we'll say int I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. Alright, and so something we can do is we have to say what number we're storing where in the array. So we have to say cin because we want the user to type it in. We say the array, and then we call I as the argument inside of the square brackets. So what this will mean is the first number that the user types in will get stored into the first element because I will be 0 when it starts. And then it will go up by 1, so then the next element will be 1. And then that's how we'll go through the whole array from 0 to 9 and store 10 integers inside of the array. Okay? But that's not the only use we have with for loops. So not only do for loops allow us to initialize an array, they allow us to perform operations on the whole array. So let's say I wanted to take an array and square root the whole thing. I mean, not square root, square the whole thing. Let's say we have already 10 numbers inside of our array. It doesn't matter what 10 numbers they are because all we have to do is say for, I forgot to grab my brush. We have to say for, oh boy, that was bad, for int I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. We could just say array I equals array I times array I. Alright, so what this will do is it'll go through each element in the array, times that element by itself, and then store it back into the array. So if I were to have in my first element slot at 0 the number 10, what would happen is it'll grab 10, times it by 10, and then store 100 back into 0. So then we just squared our array. So this will go through the whole array, squaring each number and storing it back in. So by the end of this for loop, our array will now be completely squared. Okay, so that is for loops, array declaration, and initialization. Don't be afraid to go back through the video and watch over a certain part if you didn't understand something or if you need more clarification. You can also just email any of us instructors if you have any other further questions. So now we're going to talk about passing arrays to functions. So something to keep in mind is that arrays are not passed by value. They are passed by reference. So just a little bit of a quick reminder about the difference between pass by value and pass by reference. Hopefully, as you can recall, we did pass by value and pass by reference. So we'll say pass by value over here and pass by reference. Okay, so when we did pass by value, we had our int main. Inside of our int main, we had a function call. And inside of our function call, we would usually call some sort of variable that had a number. We'll say it's an empty box. And then down here, we had our function. Alright, and we had the same variable. So when we called 5 into our function, it would get called into our function, but it was more like copy and paste. Because if I were to change this 5 by adding 1 to it, it would become 6, but the variable out here would not become 6, it would stay 5. On the other hand, though, when we're doing pass by reference, if I were to do a function call, and I were to call 5 into that function, and inside of my function, I were to change this 5 to a 6, or say 5 plus 6, it would become 11. This would change it up here. There's like a tunnel between the int main and the function itself. So this number is not 5 anymore, it is now 11. That is what pass by reference and pass by value. So that's the difference between them. Alright, so when we have an array, our whole array is passed by reference. Okay? So what that means is if we were to change an element inside of a function with our array, so if we were to change an element in our array inside of a function, it will change it inside of main too. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind when you're working with arrays. While that does make a lot of sense in theory, let's create a function that doubles all the elements in our array. So times it all by 2. When we're creating a function that takes an array, when we're prototyping it, let's say void double. That's what we'll... No, let's not do that. We'll call it double the array. Alright, and let's say int and int. Okay, so this first parameter is our integer array. So we need the square bracket so the computer knows to expect the array. And then the second parameter is just int. This is the size of our array. So when we're calling an array into a function, we have to say that it is an array, and then we also have to have a second parameter that is its size, because the function won't know the size, but we will. So I'm going to create an array inside of main that is of integer type, int array. We'll just call it int arr, and we'll make it of size 5. I want my array to have 5 numbers. So to do what we did earlier, what we learned earlier, is we're going to initialize this, or we're going to have the user initialize every element in this array. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus. Okay, we're going to actually create a const int here. int, we're going to create an int called size and set it equal to 5. So this is the size of our array, and this is the variable we'll call into our double the array function. So we'll say I is less than size now. Alrighty then. That looks much better. Cool. So now when we're initializing this array, we have to get the user to input. So we say cin array I. Alright, so we'll start at array element 0, go up to 4, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for 5 in total, and store those all inside of our array. Now before I go on side and typing more stuff into int main, let's create a function definition for a void double the array function. So as you know, we copy the first line exactly, so we just say double the array. We actually name our stuff now, so we say array. Alright, so the array that will exist inside of this function is called ARR, and we need the square brackets so the computer knows that it is an integer. And we'll say int size. I'm not passing it by reference, I'm passing it by value, because I do not want my size variable to change. I do want my array to change though, but I don't have to signify I'm passing it by reference, because normally when we pass something by reference we have to put this ampersand. Arrays are automatically passed by reference, so you don't have to put that ampersand. Alright, so this is just a void function, so we'll return absolutely nothing. And we'll now use a for loop to iterate through our array again. So we'll say int I equals 0, I is less than size, I plus plus. Cool. Now we can say array element I equals array I times 2. So what will happen is we'll grab the element in our array, times it by 2, and store it back into our array. Since the array is passed by reference, when it changes inside of here, it will change it out here as well. So now what we're missing is just calling our double the array function. So we'll go double the array. We'll call in our array name, so ARR. And as you can see though, when we're calling an array into a function though, we don't have to put the square brackets. You can just put the name of the array, and then the computer will know what you're referring to. So that is how you do a function call with an array. You just say the name of it. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to say put square brackets or anything like that. You just say the name of your array. So now let's actually print our results to the screen. So we're going to need another for loop. Yes, I know it's a lot of for loops, but that's what happens when you're working with arrays. There's no more efficient way to iterate through an array. Okay, so you just gotta live with it. I'm sorry. And so we'll see out our array I, and we're gonna add an end line just for neatness. And we'll add an end line down here. Okay, so when I run this program, what's going to happen is I'm going to type in 5 numbers. Those 5 numbers will then be doubled, and then we'll see the result of those 5 numbers getting doubled. I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry. Okay, so what you're supposed to click is you click build project 7. Hopefully you don't get any bugs. We did not get any bugs, so we hit debug, start without debugging, and we type in 5 numbers, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I did this right, what my output should be is 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Excellent, we doubled our array. Okay, so finally, I'm only going to talk about this portion right here. I'm not going to actually do any examples. But strings and arrays are super similar and alike, but they're a little bit different. So if you remember from your second week, we did do some dot functions with, third week. We did do some dot functions with strings. We did dot length, dot size, dot find, and dot substring. Alright, basically what these do is they actually treat the string like an array and actually access elements to do what they need to do. So, can't really see it here in this example, but how it works. But this is much better because they actually go through the string like it is an array. So in this case, we have a string called testing called 123. I don't know why it says twain. 123. Okay, so what they do is they get through the array, or through their string, is they actually do put square brackets and say copy plus equals testing I. And so what will happen is when they see out copy, oh yeah, so what they do is they have a string called copy, and they add each individual letter into copy. And then after they add a letter, they add a dot dot. So copy will end up like testing, but there will be a dot dot between each letter, so it'll be 1 dot dot, it'll be 0 dot dot, N dot dot, E dot dot, space, T dot dot, W dot dot, A dot dot, I on that, so on, so on, so on. Alrighty? So you can just treat strings exactly like arrays, but the something you have to keep in mind is when you pass a string into a function, they're not normally passed by reference. They're normally passed by value. So if you want to make your string pass by reference, you have to do the ampersand. Alright, so they do the ampersand right here. So exercises 1, 2, and 3. So for exercise 1, I want you to declare an integer array of size 10, ask the user to enter 10 numbers, print out the array in an index in ascending order, and then print out the array in index descending order. So basically start from 0, go to 9, and then start from 9 and go to 0. I hope you know how to use your for loops because that's exactly what you have to do. And then find the sum of the array and print it out. So you have to go through the whole array, add it all up into some other variable, and then display that sum. Exercise 2. Write a C++ program that declares an integer array of size 10 and then uses 3 separate functions, one to do each of the following. So I want you to have 3 functions, each one will do something different. So one will actually put something inside of the array, the other will display the array, and then the final one will find the maximum value and print it to main. So it says return it to be printed in main. So that means you have to make an integer returning function for this final step. And then finally, exercise 3, just listen to the comments and fill in the code. Okay, please email your lab instructors your section number and your name and your student ID number so we know who did what, and you don't end up losing marks because you didn't give us that bit of information. Just include it as a header comment inside of your file. Get these done as soon as you can, and then email them to your appropriate lab instructor. If you don't know how to find your lab instructor's email, you can come to the CS110 homepage, and then all of our emails are down the side here. So if you hold your mouse over it, or if you click on it, it will open up your webmail and you could start emailing. But if you just hold your mouse over a link and you look in the bottom left corner of your screen, it does say the email of your lab instructor. So please try and get these done. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to email us and ask if you need some clarification. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.